The Newburyport zoning board of appeals. I'm Ken Swanton, and right on cue, we have our fifth member tonight. So, we'll start out by, taking the roll. So, Mr. Shagnon, are you here?
I am here.
Yes. Mr. Bennett?
Yes.
Present. Mr. Belline?
I am here.
Ms. Scow?
Here.
And I am here as well, so that's five, so that will be the voting members tonight. We have one hearing, it takes 4 to 5 votes to pass. So with that, we'll jump right into our first hearing, which is 10 to 12 Walnut Street, and you have the floor. So introduce yourself and make your presentation.
Thank you. My name is Jesse Ambrosino. I'm the owner of the property, and my wife Jennifer over there with me here tonight, and Ryan McSherritt, who's Brickman Architectures, helping me on the project. But I'm representing myself and managing the project myself as a homeowner. So might have to ask for small forgiveness on technicalities of the code and the proper phrasing, but I'll do the best I can. We've been recognize this from the last few meetings. We've been trying to come and anticipate what kind of questions might come up and what kind of things the boards are interested in. So this is a picture of the front of the house. The primary addresses are on Walnut Street. It's 1012. It's a two-family house. So 2 addresses, 1012, as I mentioned, it's in the R2. It is in the demolition control overlay district. It's a 1850s sidewalk revival. My understanding is it's not a Form B structure. It's the proposal is to add a single-story addition. I call it a single-story addition because it's a garage sloping lot, and then an attic on the second floor. So we do have some living space on that attic area. We try to keep the roof lines underneath the existing structure. We'll see that later. As part of this, we're gonna there is a. Is it okay if I stand up and point?
Yes, go ahead.
There, you can't quite see here. There's a rather large shed back there that needs to be taken down. So that's part of this, is to take that out and put a small utility shed somewhere else in the yard, and that's included in all the calculations. The proposal does not add, there's no new nonconformities. Basically, the nonconformity that's extending is in this front setback on the side of California Street. I don't believe any existing nonconformities are intensified. And I believe proposed changes are not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. The few requirements, so I understand it. This is an updated plot plan showing the where the addition would go, the shed, as well as the existing structures on number 8 Walnut and number 5 California. You can see the setbacks there. We can go to the next slide. Any questions on that? Cool. I made a table for the.
I just want to say, we'll just ask all our questions at the end.
Oh, okay.
So the process is you do your presentation, and then we take any input from the audience or any questions from the audience, and then we ask our questions.
Got it. Okay. So I tried to put together a summary of the all the zoning matrix requirements. So the addition is off the rear. It's the existing non-conforming structure. We're extending the existing non-conforming setback along California. According to the zoning determination, start of this process, if the COD is not triggered. We also had a sidewalk review, and we did agree to repair 2 sections of sidewalk around the trees on Walnut Street, which is on the, we have that on the detail on the next slide. We'll get to that in a minute. We also calculated that the total proposed exterior change to the existing structure is below the 25% limit. So we are proposing to make some restorations to the existing structure as well, I'll go over. We meet the proposed addition, the open space and lot coverage, and side yard setbacks. They built the table across the bottom. The lot area required is 15,000. We're at 6,793. Frontage 120. We're at 82.5 on both fronts. Height is 35. It remains 29. I put the addition in there at 23.3 to show that it's lower. Coverage is 25%. Existing is 16. We're just under 25. I sized this. I created the size of the shed to get up to that limit. The open spaces, the requirement is 40. We're at 63 now, and with the proposed changes, we'll be at 49.6. The front remains which is Walnut, remains at 7.3. Side A, which is on the 8 Walnut direction, is 29, which stays, that will change there. And then California Street is side B, which is at 6.2 feet, and the addition will be set back from that house at 7 feet 5 inches, 18 inches off the back, so we can keep the trim. And the rear is 25, the existing is 36, and we will stay within that boundary, within that 25-foot setback, 25.3 where it's positioned on. Next slide. This is just showing the requirement for the sidewalk repair. We are not planning on making any curb cut changes, but it was made clear that if we do touch a curb cut, that that may impact more repair requirements. So the next section here is views of the property. This is views of 12 Walnut. So this is the existing front side of the house. This is showing the adjacent property on 8 Walnut, with the driveway and the fence and the structure you can see in the back there. This is from 12 California across the street. This is a little further down from 8 California. And then this is the view kind of directly looking at the back of the property along the property line between us and 5 California. And then I thought for reference, some pictures of the surrounding property would be helpful. This is kind of a view from across the street, looking at number 8 and down towards that's Oakland in the back there. Looking directly across the street, we have 13, then 11 and 9. 15 and then so 17 and 19 is a half house, and that was 21 and one directly across the street at 12, which is very similar style house. And then looking directly back at 5 towards Merrimack is just see the corner of 6 and can't remember what's out at the very end. So the proposed addition here is a very simple rendering of where it will put in right in adjacent to the existing. There's an existing parking area. There's a curb cut, existing parking space. So the idea is to tuck it in right behind the existing tree line there. The proposed is shown on the left, the existing facade in the front. We do want to restore the stairway to get that back to something more original. It gives you the size of the scale. This is viewed directly from the back. You see that the garage door is the primary living area added to the first floor, which is I should have probably mentioned that the overall motivation for this is to get the first unit in the two-family house is, we're trying to get it to be a single floor, first floor bedroom with no steps. Which you can't see in the picture here, is actually a ramp from here to the parking area off to the side. Right now, my folks live in a 3-story townhouse in Salisbury, which is not gonna work out too great for too long. So this is kind of an age-in-place design where the first floor is the kitchen, living room, and family room are all together. And then the second unit is upstairs in the second and third floors. That's like the basic concept that drove this floor plan. And then opportunistically, since the yard is sloping, gave me an opportunity to put a garage underneath. This is the view, if you were on Walnut, standing at 8 Walnut, looking towards the side. We're just pointing out a couple of the extra details here. We are replace the windows, replace the siding, restore the trim, get it. There's a bunch of the trim is deteriorating and needs to be replaced. And the plan is to match that trim onto the addition. The stairway there is up to the second level is the secondary egress requirement for having an upstairs unit. And they're just highlighting some of the other changes. 2/1 windows were all of them are mostly going back into their original frame size. Except these windows here are not original to the house on the third floor. So we're proposing to get those back into the size and proportion that would have been appropriate for that size of house if it actually had a third floor when it was originally built, which it didn't. Because storms were put on in 2012, I believe, from the permits. And then we want to, restore that roof line across the front to break out that dormer, and get the architecture of the house back to, back to where it should be, in my opinion. That portico in the front also is not original. So we'd like to remove that and kind of replicate the facade around that entrance door to be very similar to the side entrance on California. There's the stairway, just other things that we're trying to improve on the property. You showed these are some inspirations in the neighborhood at Woodland and Walnut. We'd like to rebuild the stairway that would kind of bring that formal entryway back into line. And then lastly, I tried to do a little analysis of area to kind of show the size of the addition in proportion to other properties in the neighborhood, and highlighting, the other properties that are kind of multi-use, either half house, 2-family, or condos, to show that, I think it's in keeping with both the architecture and the size and function of other properties in the neighborhood. And that is all I prepared.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, the way this works, now that he's made his presentation, anybody is welcome to provide comments. Anybody who's here, and then we'll check people who may be dialed in online. And you can speak for, against, or ask questions, or whatever you want. If you ask questions, he's not gonna answer them at the moment. We're just gonna go around and see what everybody has to say. And then when the members of the board here begin to ask their questions, that's when I think you'll hear some of the questions that were asked be put to the applicant. So with that, would anybody here like to say anything? Either for or against, or ask a question, or whatever. Yes, Would you please, state your name and address for the record? We have a note taker.
Yeah, John Beal, 263 Merrimack. My house is on the corner of Merrimack and California Street, so it's relatively close. So I was wondering, sounds as though the garage they're getting rid of which is not connected to the house. So this will be replacing that? Is that one of the things?
There's no garage on the property right now.
Well, shed.
They shed.
There's a small
There's
shed.
a 10 by 12 shed.
So you're gonna get rid of that,
Yeah.
and then you're gonna replace it with, basically like, it's gonna be attached to the in-law apartment, the second, apartment.
Oh, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
the garage.
I'm not supposed to be.
Yeah.
I'm just saying,
It's almost Christmas. Why don't we? Why don't you put your site plan up and explain what you're
Yeah.
doing?
Okay. So. The existing shed is here, it's rather large. That will completely go away.
yeah, okay, so that's what you're,
Yeah, so
and then
that goes away.
and then you're gonna expand, or gonna leave that in, or, that space is not gonna be added, or you're just getting rid of that?
This is just gonna go away, that'll be open
Okay.
space.
Okay,
And then I do have, I like to have a, garden tool shed.
okay,
So I
so,
have a smaller 6x8, the smaller 6x8 utility shed. Approximately over here, if you need to go anywhere, yes, it's just kind of a placeholder. The, 90% of the work or energy here is to build this addition here that has a first floor master bedroom.
so, how long, do you know what the time frame will be once you, get the go-ahead to do this? Do you have any
How
idea?
long does it take to put up? Boy,
I don't know, I mean, so that, I mean,
depends how fast Ryan gets the contractors.
yeah, the contractor can take a long,
Yeah.
time, and it can be very painful for you guys. I'm just wondering, I didn't know if you had any.
So I
ideas on that.
do have a contractor lined up and we're starting the process, we're living in it.
Yeah.
So we're gonna live in it during renovation, so nobody wants this done faster than I do.
No, no, I get that, I just,
Also, I'm pretty much. So I'm not a builder professionally, but my wife and I have renovated a number of older houses. And I'm planning to be working on that 4 or 5 days a week. So I'll be managing the contractors myself. And my goal is to have it 90% done, by the end of summer. And then that would be, the exterior work really can't start until March.
Yeah.
So it'll be done, the bulk of the exterior, is probably gonna be will be done by the end of summer. And then I'll move aside, and it might frankly take me a few years.
no, I get that. Will they, none of the trees are gonna be cut back, right? Or will, I'm trying to,
Oh, there is one tree right here.
Yeah.
That needs to come down, and there's 2 like small hemlocks that here. But the trees here, and here will all stay, we're not touching that. And there's a row of trees here that I think provide good blocking here and here that all stay. So we don't wanna pick up that.
but will the driveway shrink down a little bit, or will it stay the same?
It's pretty much gonna stay where it is.
Okay,
And
cause it's asphalt right now, I'm just wondering if you're gonna do something else.
bigger or smaller.
Well, it being asphalt, some people like it, other people wanna add granite, because in the front steps are granite. So, didn't know if you wanted to, you anticipated.
I don't like asphalt, as an impervious surface, but I'd love to do something. Up here, this part of the area is brick, which is nice, I would like to do that,
Yeah.
it's a little bit budget permitted.
Yeah, okay.
All right, do you have anything else?
I'm okay right now.
Yes.
I actually have a question.
Could you state your name and address?
Yeah, Scott Marshall, 5 California Street. What prevents them from doing this as an investment property where they flip it into 2 condos and then move out of town? If you do some Google searches, this isn't the first time they've gone in front of a zoning board.
I think that's a question that I think we'll be addressing rather than you.
Well, it's a concern as the
Yeah.
abutter.
I appreciate your question. I've written it down and we'll get to it when we're done with the collecting questions. Anyone else would like to make a comment? Anyone else in the room here like to say anything, or make a comment, or ask a question, or?
I got a follow-up.
Yeah.
So what, looks like you're gonna take down a tree, and what were some of the other things you were thinking about that you needed to be removed for the project?
Be removed.
Yeah, it sounded like there were certain things you're like changing the steps and. I was trying to understand, I didn't actually understand some of those, maybe.
Sure.
Hearing's not wonderful.
The picture of the, yeah, that might be a good one, thank you. You know, this, really what I'd like to do, if it's a sidewalk revival, and these dormers, you know, were dropped in. Maybe, I don't know how to say this in a positive way. I think they can be improved by restoring some of the, existing trim detail, like extending this roof line across to break that field up. This portico is not original, so rebuilding this trim around that door, like, you know, it would be period appropriate for this style house. You know, the stairway is rather complicated, multi-level going off the back, and if you see those examples, maybe flip down to this picture here. Just looking around the neighborhood, this is 23, just across the street a little bit, around the corner. Like to get something, you know, with brick that matches the style of the house to go in there. I actually don't think we have a room to do that, so it might need a turn, but I was just trying to show, you know, our intent.
So you're gonna get rid of the wooden steps and go to granite, maybe? Okay.
Well, so the house has a brick facade now, so I actually like this
Oh, brick.
with
Okay.
stone and brick,
Okay,
but it's DVD.
okay, good, good.
All right, thanks everyone in the room. Now we turn to anybody in our online audience. Caitlin, is there anybody out there who would? If there is, you can raise your hand by pushing the raise hand button at the bottom of the screen.
The first person is labeled Mary.
Mary, okay, we have Mary out there.
Hi, guys. Mary.
Or if you, you have to unmute your microphone and.
Echoing, 1 second.
She's talking.
Yeah, okay, is that better? Mary McCormack, 12 California Street. And appreciate the opportunity. We couldn't be there in person, so appreciate the opportunity to do it hybrid. I guess I had a couple questions. One, in addition to the construction schedule, which I heard, if I heard correctly, would be maybe March till August type of a thing. I'm wondering about days and hours, if there would be no weekend hours, what time the work would start and end every day. Is that something that can be answered now or not?
Well, yeah, oh, I'm not supposed to, right? Give me guidance.
I wonder, Andy, if you could,
Yeah, would you like me to?
yeah, why don't you, I think there's a city policy here.
Yeah, so if I, just to clarify, it seems to be a note worthy of tonight. Typically, when these hearings are held, typically what happens is public comment is taken by any member of the public, anybody who's in butter or otherwise concerned with an application for any reason. Express whatever concerns or questions you have. And then typically the board takes that under advisement, typically will ask, you know, similar questions or the same questions covering areas that they feel need to be covered based on all input that they've received. So typically, it's not usually a back and forth between, individuals and the applicant, but rather concerns expressed to the board, and then the board obviously takes those into account while addressing issues with the applicant. So questions about, hours of operation, and so whether it be, the typical way I would say of addressing that is to raise concerns about days, times of the week, or that you might be concerned about, and expressing that to the board members, have that in mind. Board members can then decide typically whether or not there needs to be imposed any conditions to cover, something or address something that they've raised as a concern. But it just helps to sort of keep the orderly function of the meetings. That's typically how these things are done. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah.
If there's some area that you think I should
Yeah,
address.
thank you for that, Andy. I think we may have gotten a little bit off of that earlier, but probably good to get back on that track. So as far as our online participant, we've written down that question. We will be asking that during the board questioning period. Do you have other questions or comments you'd like to make?
I do, yeah. Another question about exterior lighting. We are directly across from, we're 12 California, we're directly across from 12 Walnut, their California Street side, which I believe would be the upstairs entrance. So I'm wondering about lighting, if there would just be the one exterior light like there is now near that door, and if there might be some type of a shield. It's a little bright right now. I can be 2 rooms away and still get hit in the eyeball with it. And then I had another question about noise of garage doors. I don't have garage doors, but I don't know if they're mechanical or manual, or if there's any kind of noise involved with the coming of and going of cars using the garage. And that's the end of my questions. Thank you.
Okay, and did we get, we had a bit of a technical issue at the beginning. I wonder, did our note taker could you restate your name and address, please?
Sure, it's Mary McCormack, 12 California.
Excellent, thank you. We hear you loud and clear,
Thank
man. Great. Is there anyone else out there who would, in addition to Mary, who would like to make a comment? No one else out there, Caitlin? I see one more question in the room here, and this time we'll just write the question down.
Okay, good. No, I was just wondering how many occupants will basically be in this the building in general.
Okay. All right, thank you. Anyone else have any questions or comments?
I do.
Okay, would you please state your name and
Yes,
address?
my name is Kathy Geary. I live at 2 Chapel Street in town, couple blocks away. It's a very narrow street, and I'm wondering with the building process, where all the workers are going to be parking.
It's a nightmare.
Good point. Okay, thank you. Anyone else? All right, we'll close the questioning period and comment period. Now we'll come to the chance for the board here to ask their questions. And who would like to begin?
Next question.
Yes.
I think I have a couple questions. One is a question that we usually ask, I think, which is, have you talked to your neighbors about plans and all the abutters to make sure that you discuss some of their concerns and try to build them into your plans? I think, given you're representing yourself, you're not as used to seeing these types of questions. I think that a lot of attorney represented clients come in and they give us a stack of letters from their neighbors that they're not objecting. And so I'm wondering, it sounds like maybe you haven't talked to any of your neighbors about it.
Well,
I'm wondering if you've shared your plans with your
yeah,
neighbors.
actually I have, and if you scroll down to that last page. That one, the little green stars of people I've spoken with in person. Before I started this process, I did go around and put a note in everyone's mailbox with my cell phone and my email address. And in a few cases, more than once. I do have a number of text messages and emails that I didn't feel was appropriate to print out and upload. I've spoken personally with everyone in the immediate area that would let me.
I think you missed me.
Yeah, thanks for listening to.
You're right behind us, right?
You certainly are.
I put 2.
You did. You never knocked on the door though.
Okay.
I'm sorry, we need to let the conversation go through the chair here. So,
So most everyone else, I stayed at the property to, and met by, raking leaves or just, texted me in response to my note.
Now, this is a two-family house, right now, currently,
It
and
is.
is it currently occupied?
No. We're in the process of selling our house in Topsfield and plan to move in, mid-January.
And you mentioned that one of the motivations for the renovation was to change the layout of the current two-family structure. I see that do you mind going through some of the layout changes? I saw that you had some plans in the packet, but I thought it'd be
Yeah,
helpful to just go.
Sure, not at all. I did not include the floor plans in this presentation. Do you have access or
It'll take me a minute to pull that back, yeah.
So this is an overview. The current structure is basically two up down where it's kind of split vertically. With two stairways that go up, which takes up a lot of space and they're extremely steep. So part of this is also rebuilding getting all the stairways up to code. So this gives you, so this is the current layout with the sidewalk configuration this way. We would take this portion out here and you see this would be living room, kitchen, master bedroom. There's a bathroom for the floor and a small, office left room, whatever you call it. There, and then basically this portion becomes the stairway entry up to the second level. Was that your primary area of interest?
Yeah, I just wanted to see where the currently existing two units are separated, so they're.
Yeah, it's tough. So it used to be split here and this portion would come upstairs and then the other unit was very small. It was like this, and then it had a really steep stairway up to one bedroom up above here. So the one bedroom for this half was. Yeah, that we're trying to get rid of, like getting that on one level over the back.
Thank you.
okay, thank you, Lynn. Who else would like to go next?
I'll follow up a few, I guess. And just tell me how large each of the living units will be after we approve this, if we did. Roughly.
1450 and just under, they're both about 1400.
And is that roughly, and what are the current sizes?
One of them is about 100. $800, 800, and ballpark.
And how large is the additional living space in the proposed addition? How big is that?
So we're adding about, basically this is about 600 here, and then if you flip to the next. I think it's partial, there's a partial room here, so that's about 400, 450.
Okay. Yeah, can you comment a bit, I'll let you comment on the types of garage doors that you might be considering.
Yeah. So they're 8 foot tall. I think we're probably gonna go with a single, 18-foot wide door. I have belt drive,
It'll be remote control, I take it.
remote control belt drive in my house now that I think are pretty quiet,
Yeah.
but,
Fair to say that typical of remote control, garage control doors.
Yeah.
Infinity.
well, yeah, but the newer ones that are either screw or belt are way better than the old chain styles that used to rattle and clank around them.
Okay.
And I'm gonna put in a big, a well insulated door that's certainly not gonna be rattling steel, so. I would. For my, being below a master bedroom, the noise of the garage door is a big deal, so. It was certainly, that would be a consideration regardless.
Thank you. And can you comment on the exterior lighting that you install here as part of this project?
Yeah, I was not planning to change anything really. Right now, there's one side light. Right now, there is a post here. I believe Mary was commenting, she lives in 12, that's looking at the California Street entrance. There's one side light. I did not know that was super bright. Doesn't need to be. I'd be more than happy to dial that down if that was.
Are you proposing any additional lighting, I guess?
Oh, no. One light near each entrance is all I would do.
Okay. Will there be any lighting connected to the garage door?
I was I didn't have a plan, but if that was
No, I
certainly a
just
concern, yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
asking for that. I just wanted to know if you had any current plan. Can you comment a bit on the materials you intend to use to clad the structure?
We're still researching some materials. We are looking at it's a hardy board now. Unfortunately, all the windows they've been replaced with relatively inexpensive vinyl windows, and a lot of the trim is failing and has also been partially restored. So we're looking at replicating all of the same detail with a composite material, either an AZAC or some of the newer composites. And we're still looking at siding, but it's likely to be a composite siding. So.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Shagnon or Mr. Delisle, any questions or comments?
I just had one, it's in our report that I guess you've spoken to the building department for sidewalks.
Yeah.
They've added a special condition, I just want to make sure you're aware of it. Sidewalks on California and Walnut adjoining the project site will be improved to meet ADA compliance in coordination with the Department of Public Services. And that those will be done prior to the building permit closeout. You're okay with that?
I am now.
Well,
Was that a new addition? Was that added?
If I could, and just for a little bit of context, especially since not everybody in the audience necessarily knows, this is actually in accordance with a city ordinance that calls for, based on scales of projects, for the board to look at these types of things and the department to comment. So it's not atypical to expect when a project is being done of a certain threshold to have some improvements done along the frontage. In this case, typically what is referred to as a sidewalk or street trees.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, the only thing that was brought to my attention was the 2 areas around the trees.
Trees, right, and that's why I brought it up,
Yeah.
is this appears to be different than.
Yeah.
So when you spoke to them, they didn't mention making
And that
both
was,
sidewalks on both sides ADA compliant.
no, that was that in the?
I believe that was, he said discussed during the site visit review.
Did you meet with, was it Wayne Emerald maybe you met with, or did you? meet
You
with
bet,
John?
John Kerry.
John Kerry, okay, yeah.
So he mentioned verbally that if we changed if we changed any of the curb cuts, we would, and impacted any of the sidewalks, but then they would need to be brought up to ADA compliance. But if
They
we,
had discussed the repairs to the current sidewalk, is what you're saying.
all the conversation we had about California Street, and bringing that up to ADA compliance was related to any curb cut there. If the addition, impacted that curb cut, and I disrupted any of the existing sidewalks in any way, they would all need to be replaced.
I don't know if it would benefit the board, just, Karen, I don't know if we could clarify what was the actual written comment we got maybe from public services.
Do you mind reading that? I'll read it for you if you want, but.
That's fine. It says the sidewalks on California Street and Walnut Street adjoining the project site shall be improved to meet ADA compliance in coordination with the Department of Public Services. Said improvements shall be completed prior to the building permit closing. And it goes on, in extenuating circumstances, including but not limited to seasonal constraints, an alternate deadline for compliance herewith may be substituted to and approved by the sole discretion of the zoning administrator. And that, to me, that just sounded different than him
Yeah.
fixing the sidewalks in front of the trees.
I would just say without further clarification, it sounds to me more like the written comment from public services, maybe there's something lost in translation, but it sounds like they're expecting the sidewalks to be upgraded to make sure that they are ADA accessible, whereas today they may not be that case. Maybe there was something that was lost in translation, but it sounds to me based on what we got for written comments that that's the case, even if there might have been, maybe it's not something that was ever, clear, I guess, when you left with John at the site, I don't know. But
Yeah, I just want to add to that.
I'm reading you.
I just want to add to that, something personal. When somebody makes a huge improvement to a house,
Yeah.
like a big addition like that, they always have to improve the sidewalk.
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, so we get sent a letter from them
Yeah.
saying it needs to be part of the project. And it's not, you're not being sued without or anything.
Oh, no,
It's just
no.
the way they always work.
Yeah, no, like my first reaction was, okay, yeah, I was,
That's probably.
we got into a discussion about who said, like, it doesn't matter.
So how we got here.
Like, it's not
basically,
important.
it's just the way it always works when there's a large improvement to a building.
That's strong.
Yeah, that's fine.
This is strong.
Fine, so, Bud, did you have any other questions or comments?
Caleb pointed out that in the report, they do kind of explain where this came from. However, as they're explaining it, it doesn't quite agree with the actual special condition. So I'll read the whole thing. This project appears to trigger the tree and sidewalk ordinance. OPD asked the Department of Public Services for recommendations and the DPS responded, no new street trees are required. However, the sidewalk on Walnut Street will need to be updated and repaired, meeting ADA compliance and accommodating space for tree wells for the two mature trees in this section. So I think that's what they spoke to you about.
That's right.
It goes on. On California Street, where the second curb cut for this property is located, should the work encroach into the right of way and the apron for the new elevation and the proposed addition and garage parking, that area too will need to be replaced and brought up to code under ADA compliance. I think you said that too, if you heard it, if you touch it. Given the DPS recommendations, please see the below suggested draft special conditions, should the ZBA be inclined to grant the request. I think the special condition goes one step further and says you will fix California Street.
Right,
Doesn't say if you touch it.
right.
So if it pleases the board, we could revise, if the board is inclined to open the permit, we could revise that language accordingly to better align with the DPS comment, if you will.
Yeah,
And
I
that way
think
we're
that would
not,
be fair.
that we're unnecessarily imposing that requirement, but we're making it contingent upon the alteration. If it happens, then they have to bring.
Then they have to do
Yeah.
it, because that was your understanding, correct? If you were to touch California. Okay,
That,
that makes sense, Chair?
Yeah, no, it does, but thank you for digging down further on that one. I think it now aligns with the previous conversation that Disney had. But did you have anything else?
No, that's it, all the other questions.
Mr. Lyle,
Ask.
anything?
Yeah, I'll ask a couple of questions. Just picking up on some of the questions asked by some of the attendees here at the meeting. With regard to the when the work is underway, Walnut Street and California Street are narrow, densely populated streets. So can you speak to, what you'll do with respect to the workers parking so that the residents aren't using all their parking as well?
For sure. So I do think we are fortunate enough to have, 4 off-street parking places already. So certainly take full advantage of that. And, you know, I can, I've tried to give everyone cell phone and contact info. I can try to make sure, you know, people park far away, that we're not racking up all the subs all at once, that there's only 1 or 2 trucks on site at a time. Like, it's usually how things flow anyway. I'm not really sure what more I can do on that. If there's any specific guidance or requests, certainly willing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that just generally, you know, try and be accommodating of the neighbors. I think making use of the on-site parking that you have is probably would probably go a long way, although I would imagine that some of it will be eaten up when you're doing your the site work and dumpster and whatnot. But that might be something to consider, you know, parking a little bit further away or something like that. I'm not really sure what one will do, but just to be accommodating of the others on the street, I suppose. And then similarly,
There are lots that, we're not far from the lots in Cashman, and we could certainly relocate our vehicles there while work's being done. Well,
okay, and then similarly, with respect to the hours of work, just standard hours. I think that, Andy, isn't there a condition in
The standard boilerplate condition,
Yeah.
I believe we have a standard boilerplate condition, we don't, it's very rare, generally speaking, for the board to have, you know, unusual specification for hours per se, that isn't maybe.
the standard is like, it's 7 to 5 on weekdays and 8 to 4 on Saturdays?
That sounds right, yeah.
No Sundays, right?
You know, Sundays is typically, yeah,
7 to 5 weekdays and
weekdays, Saturdays is 7 to 4, I believe.
8 to 4. I think.
Sorry, 8 to 4, sorry, yeah. You know, typically don't work on Sundays, just to kind of get residents that are butters and what they do.
But that's a condition of the permit, standard condition of the permit, yeah.
certainly hear that.
Anything else?
I think that's it for me.
All right, I had some questions, let other people ask them. Oh, no, one didn't get asked, which was the occupancy. Well, actually, there's another one, your question as well. I think you already mentioned your family and your, I guess your parents or something, or?
So my wife and I have one daughter who's in college. She will, when she's home, she'll be with us summers. And then, you know, in 2-3 years after this is done, my parents are ready. They would come into my mother's stepfather.
Well, that would be 4 people in one college, basically. The other question, I don't think it's a question for you really. It's a question more, I think, we happen to have the head of our planning department here, and perhaps he can answer the question, which is, I think the question was, what prevents him from simply flipping this into condos? And what is the process that would, that's not a by right thing, I assume, don't they have to, what do they have to do if they want to make a 2-family into condos?
There is a city condo conversion ordinance, but I think we'd have to have some further discussion about what that language says and how that operates today versus updates or changes that might happen to it. Generally speaking, the zoning ordinance doesn't deal with the form of ownership for, you know, these units, meaning if someone wants to sell, you know, a unit, they can sell a unit. If it's a 2-family, they could be owned separately, you know, per se. So I guess if generally speaking, this sometimes comes up here, but there's not an ordinance that prohibits someone, you know, as long as it's compliant with the zoning ordinance for the use that's going on, to sell, you know, the individual units or to have them separately owned, if you will, if that's the.
I don't put you on the spot. Do you happen to know if this unit complies with being able to sell it as 2 condos? Does it have the proper areas and frontages or whatever is required?
I have not examined this myself. I'm following obviously just from the materials that we typically get for the ZD application to make sure it complies with the ordinance and then get the relief that's needed. But if there's something else that you're looking for, I'm not, you know,
Okay.
sure what that would be.
I mean, typically, we don't run into those questions. People, they don't come to us and say, I'd like to make it a condos now. And that's something, we don't really get involved in that. The prior occupant of this, who apparently sold it to this gentleman, could have perhaps sold it for condos, but he could sell it for him. It's not something we get involved with. It's not something we really consider.
And one of the years that it has come up a number of times in the years is typically when there's rental units and we have complaints or concerns about people who are concerned about those becoming just, you know, condo units that are sold off as opposed to being rental stock in the community. For residents who live here, like rental units, that's typically where I hear that concern being raised. And again, we don't have anything in the ordinance that prohibits that from happening. There's been, you know, there's discussion about notifying the city, but the, you know, tools by which to stop, you know, change that, that's another issue.
I assume you don't have any intention to turn this into condos?
I don't.
Thought I'd ask for the record. All right, I have no other questions.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Oh, we have a follow-up question.
Yeah, you just sort of, explained that your parents would be moving in there in like 2 to 3 years, I think you said. In the interim 2 to 3 year period, would you be renting it, or what would you be doing under, or would you be just completing the
I'll
work?
probably be working on it.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
All right,
And, you know, my daughter coming back from school.
so we will close the question period now from the board. Now what we do is we go around the table and we hear from each person whether they can support this application or whether they're unlikely to support the application. And it has to pass a two-pronged test, and I would appreciate it if people, when they make their comments, address whether or not it passes those two prongs. So who would like to begin?
I'll give it a
Mr. Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Ambrosino, for your presentation. It was quite thorough, despite the lack of guiding hand of competent lawyer. You did quite well. From a lawyer. So I say that somewhat with trepidation, because we don't want to get around that people without lawyers. It was quite good, that was very helpful. Well, as Mr. Swanton indicated, there are two criteria here. The first one is you have to demonstrate that there's no non-conformity, and there's no non-conformity. So then we must wrestle with the second prong of the analysis, and that is whether or not what you are proposing here is substantially detrimental to the neighborhood or to the existing structure and the existing lot. In that regard, I make a number of observations. First, the addition is large, relatively large. There's no getting around it. It's about 26 by 24, so it has a pretty significant footprint. However, this begins the analysis, I guess, from my perspective. Even though it's quite large, certainly you continue to meet the open space and lot coverage criteria under our zoning ordinance. Secondly, I note that you're extending the nonconformity some 25 feet, give or take. You are setting back the proposed non-conforming structure by a foot or so, a foot and a few inches, so that it is not as intrusive as the existing structure. I for one appreciate that. I also note that as part of this proposal, you are intending to make some significant improvements to the existing structure, windows, portico, the trim, and improving the entrance, all of which I think go a long way to enhancing the nature of the structure and enhancing the architectural consistency and integrity of the structure. So I also appreciated your chart that you brought us, which is on the screen right now, which which you have attempted to put your proposed structure in context, in terms of size and scale and massing. In the neighborhood, and I note that, a good gentleman, and the overall size is not, is essentially consistent with the neighborhood. And that is, a factor that we will to frequently during the second prong, satisfaction. So all that being said, since there is no new conformity, and since, in my opinion, the structure is not substantially detrimental to the existing structure and the lot itself or the neighboring structures, then residents aspire to get rid of this proposal request for a special permit.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Who else, who would like to comment next? The board.
I'll comment next. I think I pretty much agree with Mr. Bennett. I wonder about the long garage door as opposed to two garage doors, and just if that would be more obtrusive when it opens to have a giant garage visible as opposed to, you know, one car stall visible. So I'm a little concerned about that, and I think I'm also a little concerned about sort of the access stairway on the back of the new the proposed structure. Sort of the lighting there, I think might be more complicated than maybe answering it off the cuff earlier, in that you have a couple of different landings and maybe, you know, it might be darker under those stairs than anticipated, and you do have different entry doors. But I think again, the special permit requires that as a standard condition, that those lights sort of are down facing lights. But that's probably worth considering further.
Can I come?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
My earlier response about no additional light, my orientation was around exterior. It seemed to be, or the conversation tended to be around
Oh, the streetscape,
like,
yeah.
what's affecting the other neighbors, but your point is well taken, that side is gonna face 8, so I need to be 8 walnut, so that I need to be
Yeah,
aware of that.
That backside, doesn't it face the 5, the sort of their
The face of the garage will
face 5, but sort of
that nook, that corner there
Yeah.
is really towards the more.
okay,
in that area.
yeah, so it'll impact, yeah, I see what you're saying, I see where,
Yeah,
okay. I meant 5 California, you were saying 8 Walnut, right, so,
I mean, the stairway you're talking about is like this, like here.
yeah,
I guess I would think those lights would be.
more that way, well, yeah, okay. Them too.
Them too, yes.
So I think, those are the areas of concern that I had, but as far as the size and the massing, I think you're gonna be okay with respect to open space and lot coverage. And you're well under the existing ridge height, so I don't think that the massing is gonna be a problem for me. But I do think, that some of those sort of neighbor features are important here, especially when you're kind of, looking out to the side of 5 from the garage. Maybe those, the 2 doors, I think might be more palatable than the one giant door. So I think, and otherwise, there's no non-conformity and.
We had originally drawn it as 2, and for that reason, we prefer the aesthetics, and we both prefer the aesthetics. The conversation around the 1 was just radiuses and things like that.
Yeah, no, there's all sorts of different practical things from aesthetic things, yeah, I understand. But I think, I'm okay to support this.
Okay. What, do you have?
Yeah. I have to agree with my fellow board members. I don't think there's any new nonconformity, and I do think there's no, it's not detrimental to the neighborhood. When I first looked at the drawings, the scale and everything bothered me a little bit, but to be honest, it does fit in with the neighborhood as you drive around there. There are some homes that are in the 3,000 square foot area here and there sprinkled about. There are some smaller ones. But this, I think, fits on the lot. The lot's big enough. With it dropping off as it goes down California, I think what they're proposing fits well. And I do appreciate, as Mr. Bennett said, some of the improvements they're gonna do to the building. You know, some of the upgrades, changing the roof line in front of the dormer, the portico, windows. I think that's all steps in the right direction. So nice of them. With that said, I can support the application.
All right, thank you. For my own comments, once again, much of what I was gonna say has already been said by my colleagues. Mr. Bennett was listing the things that improve the house. I would also add that what you're doing on putting the roof there underneath the dormer windows, helps a lot, going from that yellow house to the other house, I think. Restoring that roof line, I think also deserves to be in the minutes. On the garage doors, you know, you put in your plans 2 garage doors. I know you said 1 garage door, but when you hand plans into the planning department, and if we were to approve this plan with 2 doors, then you gotta build it with 2 doors. So.
My mistake, I didn't appreciate that detail would be.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, basically, the plans that you hand in are what we assume you're building. So if you have other changes, you should speak up soon.
Understood. Is the preference of the board that it's 2 doors?
I heard that from one of my colleagues.
I mean, as a condition that we put in this, I'm okay with that if that's.
Well, I don't. Yeah, I think what I'm trying to say, it's on the plans.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, and just to supplement what the chair is saying, typically because they are incorporated in the decision, this is the approval, meaning you have to do 2 doors, so.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so which is to the chair's point, it's quite important to know that what you have in the plans is what you want to do, otherwise you're gonna have problems down with the building department because they can't give you permits that are inconsistent with what the plans show here, so.
I mean,
Understood.
many of our applicants hire a lawyer and, you know, bring in this, who's done this a million times. I applaud you for trying to do this yourself, so you may not realize that, but the plans that you hand in become part of the approval. And those are your plans, and if you want to change something, it's a process you have to work through with the planning department. And it's not that easy.
Best to have the plans right in the first place, yeah.
Yeah, it's better to get the plans right, so. But anyway, I think my colleagues have kind of said, from my perspective, you know, walking around that neighborhood, it's not gonna stick out as an overly large house. I mean, it's on a decent sized lot, and it fits the coverage ratios, and it's not like a big 2-story addition. It's, I realize that has a garage under it, but I think it's fine. So with that, I'm gonna look for a motion. Did I get you all? I guess I didn't. Don't forget. Sorry, I didn't even.
That's all right.
Just because you were
You came late by 1 minute.
I'll be quiet.
All right. Sorry.
No, I would echo all of the comments of my colleagues here. I think that, you know, clearly it meets the first prong that there's no new nonconformity, and with respect to the second prong, that it's not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. I think, you know, echoing what everybody else has said, that the plans look like it's an improvement, you know, to the current form of house that's there. Although I would add, I typically take comfort when people have sign off on their neighbors, that their neighbors don't think it's substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. And that, you know, I'm sorry that that's missing here, because it does, you know, they're the ones that have to live next to it and live in the neighborhood. So we don't always take what they say as, you know, as determinative, but it does always give me comfort that my determination of what's good for the neighborhood is accurate. So, but that being said, I could support this.
All right, sorry.
May I just ask one question? I asked to this garage door, I just want to make clear, I agree with my colleagues that aesthetically, I prefer double door. You raised the notion you made some reference about turning radius and the like. I would hate for you to have to come back here. Have you comfortable with that? Does that meet the logistical requirements here?
It is.
Okay, that's all I want to know.
Okay, with that, I'm looking for a motion.
Thank you. I would move that,
It's 1012 Walnut Street.
Yeah.
What do you want the,
computer just.
was it ZNC 2331, is that what it is? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes. ZNC 23-30.
I will move that the request for special permit for non-conformity for application of a pipe that should not be granted with the conditions set forth from the.
Department of Public Services, but we're gonna modify it.
Why don't you continue with the?
Want me to try and
Yes.
modify it? All right, so the sidewalk on Walnut Street adjoining the project shall be improved to meet ADA compliance in coordination with the Department of Public Services. Said improvements shall be prior to the building permit closeout. If the sidewalk on California Street is modified or improved, that sidewalk adjoining the project site shall be improved to meet ADA compliance in coordination with the Department of Public Services. Said improvements shall be completed prior to the building permit closeout. That, I think that's more in keeping what you heard and what was written about it.
That was my original understanding.
All right, so we have a motion. Would somebody like to second it?
I'll second
It's been moved and seconded. So now we will go around the table. It takes 4 votes. Mr. Bennett,
Yes.
Mr. Shagnon.
Yes.
Ms. Scow.
it. Yes.
Mr. Milano.
Yes.
And I vote yes. It's 5-0. You have approval.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks. Good luck with your project.
Thank you.
All right. That is our only hearing this evening. Next item of business is to approve the minutes of our last meeting. I assume everybody received them. Are there any suggested changes to the minutes?
Good. Spell check.
She's running it through.
Must be running it through spell check. Spell grammar and thesaurus check.
Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that the minutes be approved, that's submitted.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. It is approved unanimously. All right, there's one other topic, which is we were gonna talk about FCRUs tonight, but as I understand it, our attorney is busy and just started looking at it, or we'll be looking at it our next meeting. Is that correct? Pretty much.
Yeah, our council had to back up a couple of things I had to take care of already, so unfortunately, we weren't able to get responses back then for this particular meeting, so our plan is to, once we get those responses back, we'll have that discussion that I think the vice chair had originally expected, we would have, they're basically supplemental questions after the council's adopted the ordinance, and we know that you have as a board have to approve the special permits for the limited scope of those that are in the investor category. The question was, there's a couple of questions which I think the members have seen, essentially along the lines of, some guidance for how the board, might make its conclusions, how to sort of evaluate that, if you will, and how the abutters, if they're aggrieved by something, how they might, how that might be looked at. So in essence, council's been asked to chime in on that a little bit, and whenever we get back, we'll circle back with you and then have some discussion from there. Obviously, however many we get at some point, you'll have those in front of you as special permits. But as I think Ken had pointed out previously, right now we have the basics, other than the, sort of requirements that we met, we have the basic special permit requirements. There weren't any special unique provisions, if you will, that had to be added to like a new finding that the board had to make in relation to short-term rental units. So you have your typical, is it a, a problem for the neighborhood? It's those typical kind of evaluations that you would do, the usual listing that we've seen. So sometimes the council or the legislative body will put in some kind of special provisions or evaluation you're doing here. It has to meet the requirements of that ordinance, obviously, and typically it's not going to come to you by the zoning administrator unless it does, meet that threshold. But then you're going to have the typical special permit criteria for evaluating whether or not to grant that special permit for use.
So do you anticipate we'll be getting input from the city solicitor before we have to rule on one of these things?
Definitely, definitely.
Great.
Yeah, and that's obviously important.
Yeah,
It's very important.
Yeah, we try to be respectful of the fact sometimes council needs a couple weeks to circle back on something, again, depending on bandwidth and so forth, but obviously, a few weeks out should be reasonable enough time, and after that, then it's kind of like, all right, we're paying you, so.
Are there any in the hopper yet? Have you received any requests from SDRUs?
I don't know whether Jennifer has spoken. I mean, we haven't had any formal applications, if that's what you mean.
All right,
No,
so we have time.
we're actually in the process right now of finalizing the sort of guidance for folks online. We're paralleling some other communities have been looking at for examples of, how they sort of provided guidance to folks, what things to, make sure are in place or look for. We're planning on sending out some notices to folks that are, listed as running short-term rental units, letting them know, be aware, you need to, if it's not a zoning provision, you certainly need to get a license, but basically telling them where to look for the regulations, check in with us and kind of giving folks a heads up. Obviously, we have, if you've been tracking the whole discussion, and you know where it is, we have some folks who are actually investors according to the state as of a certain threshold, a certain time frame, which is February of this year, and that has a 3-year term basically on it, a maximum that they have to run out before it's essentially amortized in the city as a category, unless the council were to amend that ordinance. So it's basically amortized, in the 3-year period, 3 license cycles, but 1 special permit cycle essentially.
Okay,
Can I ask a question?
sure, yeah.
Did, were you guys able to make any progress on how the meetings will be conducted, whether it would be live only or not live only?
Oh, sure. If it's all right to switch gears to that, yeah, thank you. I'm glad you brought that up because I actually want to touch base on that briefly. The planning board had a slightly different take as we were talking about pros and cons, and some of this has come out. I think you're, talking about, we have these owl cameras and we've been using them since the pandemic, and we've had some mechanical issues with them that have been a problem, at least I've seen. I think Caitlin's seen a few of them as well. Our IT department has dealt with some of them, but we've also had, there's been in a couple of recent council meetings, there were a couple of resume bombing attempts in there. So there was some concern raised by this committee at one of the last meetings, I think it was the very last one, or the one before that, about modifying our approach where we have folks comment in person, right? That was part of and one of the things that came up in our discussions as we were talking to the planning board and thinking sort of internally, and I would just flag for you is, I don't know, again, it's just leave it to you, if you want to handle it, we can modify the approach, but I would be hesitant, just given all the considerations. First off, I would not want to preclude, I know the last time we talked about this, the sort of bright line rule I think the board members were suggesting was nobody is participating remotely or just sort of streaming it. I just wanted to throw out there, just by example, we oftentimes, with whether it's a council meeting or a board member meeting, oftentimes it comes down to expense and availability. If you wanted legal counsel to be here, I wouldn't want to preclude, for instance, our legal counsel from participating remotely if you wanted them to, and yet your bright line rule might sort of preclude that, if you will. So just to throw out there, the other thing that sort of, by extension of that, and it's up to you as a board how you want to handle it. I would prefer myself, if I were, the board, recommending something, I would recommend some latitude, at least on your own part as board members, to participate remotely, should you need to satisfy a quorum or keep things moving sort of efficiently. To me, I would hate to see us sort of shoot ourselves in the foot by not making that a possibility to the extent it's allowable. If you wanted to basically say to all your members, we all have to be here in the room, and it doesn't matter if, who would be able to participate remotely, that's a judgment call, and you can make a decision, but it then requires more people to be physically available. And I don't have any preference per se with that, just that generally speaking, I would suggest maintaining some flexibility so that you can, do what you need to do as a board. And so that's something you might want to consider before we just sort of unilaterally cut off, even board members participating remotely if need be, or legal counsel, versus saying to the public, come in person. The last thing I would just say is that, Ken and I were talking about, I'll just give you my perspective on it is, when I started as a planner, this Zoom stuff, the online stuff was just not a tool, right? And I just happen to think that in today's modern age, that probably folks, whether it's since the pandemic or not, have probably become more accustomed to the idea of participating remotely. So it's not necessarily a requirement at all, per se, but some folks have sort of become accustomed to that. So we can certainly broadcast and try to make it clear, where there's been a change of sort of how we do things. And we would want to make sure with our notices, we talk in the office, we would want to make sure our notices going forward say, if the board wants folks to comment in person, we would want to put that in the notice so that there isn't anybody who's, feeling disgruntled because they weren't quite aware and they've gotten used to a couple of year cycle in which, they could come and do remotely. We want to just make sure that's very clear up front. So we put it on our website. If you want to comment, come in person, or on the notice, and, the paper and go to a butters, come in person. But again, that's up to, how you want to handle it. Generally speaking, with the planning board, for instance, just by way of example, they weren't quite, yet ready to sort of say, pull the plug on that whole end of the spectrum. There's, still sort of a tendency, obviously, for understandable reasons, to want things to happen in the room. It's a little bit more efficient, there's less likelihood of technical issues and whatnot. But there was a little bit more skepticism, let's say, on the planning board end of pulling the plug on something that might be beneficial as a tool periodically. To me, the awareness that folks have for the meetings and the engagement is a good thing in general with planning generally. But obviously, as you as board members have pointed out, there are pros and cons to different aspects of it, and you have to make a call as to how you want to handle those. So just with those in mind, tell us how you want to handle it, and we'll make the adaptations. We're just trying to make sure we don't get people who are sort of disgruntled, not caught off guard, or frustrated by the new change in policy or how we handle things.
So you're saying basically the planning board is continuing for legal counsel for their own members and also for the public. But I guess the city council isn't,
Yeah, city council doesn't allow the public to phone in.
Yeah, so I don't know, I saw one or two of the Zoom bombing attempts. I know it took a little longer for them for some reason. I sort of paused one of them, or two of them, but anyway, I can't speak to their experiences. Each board obviously has to sort of, we don't have a city policy that is mandatory for each board to follow that same policy. So there is some, latitude if you want to do something a little bit differently here. And we're trying to be just, responsive to how each board wants to handle it. The council has, I think, made, a decision based on 2 recent meetings where there was a Zooming attempt during the public comment period they had. We haven't had that here. I remember at one point during the pandemic, there was something in the school department, maybe once, and maybe the city council at one
We
point.
never had anything like that.
I don't recall us having any.
We had strange meetings, so they went for
After
hours and
midnight.
hours. and hours.
We did have a few where the public comment period might have gotten a little bit,
The public comment got a little
over.
crazy. too.
Yeah, but that's
They felt
different, I
people
think,
were-
than.
People were having some
Yeah.
some drinks while they waited for their turn in the queue.
So again, it's up to you how you want to handle it. It's just,
Well, they really have to work a little harder.
Did we, I know we had a discussion of this recently, did we actually take a vote as to what we want to do, or was it just a sense of the board, or what?
I mean, you didn't take a formal vote. You kind of made it clear to us that you wanted to have a bright line where nobody was participating remotely and
Starting like in January.
yeah. And
Right.
so we were kind of,
Are
thinking,
you
all
kind
right.
of pushing back now, saying, what should we consider basically the planning board's not doing that?
I mean, I guess I guess the main thing is that it's up to you as a board. The bare minimum, I certainly wouldn't preclude legal counsel if you want them, if they're needed for some reason. I'm not saying they're needed for this next meeting, but that to me would be,
Even Mr. Delisle agrees with that one.
Yeah.
and then,
It's a good thing to have people participating in government. I think there's such a lack of transparency in the city generally, that I think having people be able to watch and participate from, online when we have the tools is a good thing, for me, when I had young children, it was not possible to come to city meetings, right? Especially when you have to sit for 2 hours and wait for your turn, and to see what's happening, and to be able to do that, and not have to walk into a meeting late after your kids go to bed. I personally think it's a good thing. Unless we have a specific reason, for people not to participate remotely. I think that, if we think people are too quick off the cuff when they're participating by phone, make them appear on camera, for example, so that, people see their faces and looking you right in the eye when you're insulting each other. But, that's my personal opinion.
Yeah, and I tend to agree, and I mainly, don't forget, I'm also looking as a planner, I'm also looking at the comprehensive planning process for a community, long range planning, land use planning and so forth. So to me, community engagement is a very important facet of that. I do think in the same context of permitting, it's very important too, because you get that broader input. You can't have every butter, can't possibly, unfortunately, be here, for hours, each night. There are some folks who can be here at each council meeting or each planning board meeting or each CBA meeting. But the vast majority of people can't do that. So to me, it's actually a good thing from a comprehensive planning perspective or a community engagement perspective to have that. But again, that's up to you as a board, how you want to handle it. To me, it's been actually a good thing since the pandemic sort of advent of this kind of tool here. Granted, there's pros and cons, and I certainly have not been happy with some of the equipment we've had up until now. I've been pressing for better stuff. And that we're sort of migrating and we're getting that, mobilization that finally, we had a lot of delays in transition from our ITN where we had a transition of IT over a period of year, but,
Excuse me.
yeah.
Can I just comment?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think there are a number of categories here that participate. So the first category is the applicant and the applicant's representatives. I have felt that, that category should be present and should not be able to appear for money. Full stop, no exceptions. The next category is, of course, the board itself. My feeling is if we're gonna demand that of the applicants and the representatives, it should, then the zoning board members should act in the same fashion. We have 7 members. And we have a membership that's pretty committed to attending in person. And honestly, if there's a situation where where we can't have a quorum, well, that's just the rights. I just think that the applicants and the board should be here live. Now, then the category becomes the unwashed public. Well, the public certainly can watch. I'm fine with that. We're online, they can watch. So the real rub comes, should the members of the public be able to comment online? My personal opinion is that if it's of a significant concern and I spend my time and the applicant spends their time, then that person should spend their time if it's that important to them. I get the point that, it makes a hardship, but it's no less or no more a hardship than the applicant to get here and all. So I like the bright line, but, and with the final category, the lawyer, I suppose we can.
I'll just give them lawyers breaks.
Yeah.
The rest of the planet has to be there in person.
Honestly, I mean, I take no view on that. That's kind of my view on the whole thing. And I think that's where we came out last time, and now we can reconsider and we can parse that. And
that was some of the discussion last time was
do it. So
at least the applicant and the board, the
I can
impression.
understand the applicant. I don't know, I don't agree with the abutters. They're not the ones making the application, right? It's being forced on them. So I think I would grant them more latitude.
I'd like to make a suggestion, just process-wise here. We're missing 2 of our members, including our chair. Andy's brought up some interesting thoughts. Shannon chimed in. I think we should kind of think about it. You made some interesting points there. I'd like to think about them all, but I think we should put it on the agenda to talk about.
Okay.
Rather
Carry
than,
the next agenda.
rather than try to do it now, because it wasn't really on it's not really on the agenda. It's just an update.
Yeah.
I think we should have it as an official agenda item and give Rob and Patricia a chance to join me too.
Okay.
But I guess, Andrew, I just want to be clear, this is our decision as to how we run our hearing, is that correct?
Correct. There's no-
Council has no say in this, so they're gonna.
Yeah, the only thing I recall that we've had on this was a couple years back, the requirement that we record meetings, but that's a different thing than I think we're talking about here. So-
And there's no state
I just-
requirements in this regard. The state grants latitude to do it
Yeah.
or not.
No, I mean, then maybe down the road, there'll be some sort of technological sort of, statutory update for something like that, but nothing right now.
So do we have room on our next agenda to just schedule this conversation?
We'll just add it at the end, yeah,
We'll just put it on our next agenda as an official topic.
sure.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to bring it up, unofficially, I thought it was dovetailing out of.
No, it's good timing actually, because we're getting to the end of the year, and it's good to know, you did actually talk about January 1.
We can bring up anything we want. I just think we shouldn't make a decision without it being on the agenda.
Oh, yeah.
Anything else? Any other updates from the planning director?
Just one thing briefly, and again, not that there's anything significant about it in my view, because I'm familiar with most of the details that I've seen thus far, but there was a lot of talk about the global site, so-called global site on High Street. That matter has been before the city council, and the planning board as well to the zoning change. Just as context, right now, because of the way the zoning works and the contemplated zoning change the city council is looking at, what has been contemplated here essentially is the ZBA as the permitting authority to review the plans for that development. I'm reasonably comfortable with where the plans have gone thus far in the discussion. So if there's further information you're looking for on that, we can circle back with you, and certainly we'll have in our staff report, plenty of background, assuming you get an application sometime next year. But the idea there is to have essentially 4 residential units. There's a sketch plan that's in the development agreement the city council looked at. Just wanted to note that for you because there's been a lot of conversation about it. And right now, Just to be clear, what we're expecting is the ZBA to have jurisdiction over that development, not necessarily the planning board based on the zoning ordinance right now. That's perfectly fine in my view. I think there's plenty of latitude there for the board to review it as a discretionary special permit and enough controls to make sure that whatever happens there is going to come out right and well for High Street. But I just wanted to flag that because one of the questions that came up during the zoning discussion was commercial uses, and just FYI, I wouldn't be recommending in favor of any commercial uses at that location. I would recommend for residential, which is the whole basis of discussions we've had. So just wanted to let you know as kind of a heads up, or even months down the road, but we think we're going to see something that will eventually allow us to have the gas station go away and have residential units. You would be the board to see that. And like I said, I'm not concerned at all per se about the plan we've been seeing that might come forward. I just want to let you know because it has been discussion about it. And so if you're hearing about it and you don't want to, you're the board that would probably see that.
It's gonna be rezoned by multifamily, though.
That's the assumption, right?
So why would it have to come in front of us? Why would they need a special permit for that? If it is-
Multifamily is a special permit.
It is, always,
You're gonna,
okay.
yeah, in the 40R district, it's not, and we are talking about making some changes elsewhere to satisfy the so-called MBTA communities guidelines, which includes Story Avenue. But before, we haven't gotten there yet, and so there's a possibility of some of those other core areas having some streamlined as of right, so to speak, like the 40R, where there's design controls, but the use isn't in question, multifamily. But here, and these are other areas of the city that are more residential in nature and not so much, mixed use centers. That is a special permit use. So, yeah.
They're not gonna bring back Bossy Gillis's mother's house though, right?
Yeah, I don't think you're gonna see that.
It's supposed to be a 3-unit and a carriage house in one, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, good, that's interesting.
It sounds good.
It is good. It's much
Compared to
better.
what was there.
Definitely, yeah, and I think it's, they have a good architect, at least right now, work with them, I think it'll come out well, and obviously, because it's a discretionary permit, I'm sure if we get something that's gonna bastardize the intersection, you can just say no, or continue the hearing, so I'm not too worried about that. But we've also been by belt and suspenders asking for a deed restriction to prohibit commercial uses, which I'm hopeful will wrap itself up in a couple weeks, and then we will have that also in hand.
Caitlin, did you have your hand up there?
Just wanted to let you know, do you have someone in the audience that's been raising their hand? Connie Preston has been raising her hand.
Oh,
Um,
city councilor?
Just pop it up.
She can hear us.
Connie Preston, if you're out there, we could unmute your mic and you're welcome to say something.
Yes, thank you. I have been attempting to contribute for quite a while and no one has been recognizing me. So my concern is around the conversation around the short-term rental units and how to handle these applicants as they come in. I want to be very clear that we should not be giving special recognition to people who want to have comment and being able to do that over Zoom while requiring the applicants to be present in person. That absolutely makes no sense to me at all. And I want to be very clear, we've had a lot of conversation on council as we talked about the intent of how we saw special permits for short-term rental units playing out. And in particular, any sort of bias that might be handled within the ZBA, and anything that would be, untoward against what the council had intended for the following out of the special permits. And, I'm disheartened to hear a conversation of saying that applicants have to absolutely positively be there in person, but anybody else that wants to comment could do that over Zoom. And I just want to really stridently show my concern. Yeah, maybe. And I will continue to call into these meetings. I've listened to all of this meeting just to participate in this particular piece, and I will continue to pay attention to these meetings. And I just want to make sure that you guys understand that we're here, we're listening, and we want to make certain that, the council's desire and thoughts about how this should be handled should be followed through with the ZBA. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me just make a comment or two. The conversation we got into around whether people need to be here in person, it was really not specifically about STRUs. It was more because we had heard the city council was getting away from, remote meetings. And, we had some, during the COVID epidemic, we had meetings going well past midnight with over 100 people, and it was very difficult. Since then, it's gotten much easier, but we're trying to figure out, where do we go? Do we have applicants here? Do we have, people remotely? That's really completely separate from our STRUs. We had an STRU topic on the agenda here because we think we're about to get many applications, and we're just a little confused a little bit about the wording of the law that we have to rule on, and we're just trying to get some input from the city solicitor before we get the application, so that we are well versed in what has been passed and we can follow the guidelines. So anyway, that's two different conversations were occurring there. One on STRUs, where we're trying to do a little homework before we get applications, and the other was we're trying to figure out, where we are on remote meetings. And those two kind of fit together.
I guess what she's saying though is the city council has some expectation that if we're gonna have to have the STRU applicant in front of us,
Yeah,
that anyone making comment to that should be in front of us as well. Sounds like the city council has that expectation. It'll be live and live.
oh, I thought she was saying the STRU applicant could be remote.
No,
Connie, could you, I'm sorry, could you,
I
Did
want
you
to be
say-
clear, sorry,
Sure.
if I may, I want to be clear that I don't think that if commenters can be hybrid, then I think applicants can be hybrid. If commenters, if applicants have to be there in person, then I think commenters have to be there in person as well. I just don't want to see any particular bias one way or the other.
okay.
Does the ordinance speak to that?
And are you just talking about short-term rentals? I think
Yeah,
she.
well, I was asking a question about the ordinance in particular. Does the ordinance speak to that?
Doesn't speak to it now.
The ordinance does not, to my knowledge, the ordinance does not in particular speak to that, no.
Well, okay.
But, I think they're just, no matter whether this pertains to short-term rental units or anything, I think that if you're requiring one side of the application to be present in person, then I think the commenters have to be present in person, or you should offer hybrid to everyone.
I'm curious, what do you guys do? I mean, we've gotten that stuff secondhand. Could you tell us directly? What does the city council do? Do you require people to be there, or do you take everybody remotely?
We take everyone remotely. We have recently been challenged with the fact that we frankly have had a lot of anti-Semitism Zoom bombing happening in our meetings. And so only very, very recently, the council president has unilaterally, without any discussion with the council, made the decision to not take online comment. I think there are several of us on the council that, really sort of are concerned about that. Obviously, we don't want to give oxygen to anti-Semitism or racism through Zoom bombing, but we also most certainly don't want to cut off public comment. And frankly, as you mentioned, the pandemic has made hybrid meeting attendance sort of the more norm, and we need to find a way to get back to that. As you may be aware, our last city council meeting was last night. We did take hybrid public comment at that particular meeting. But I think as we move into our next session in our retreat, and I so apologize for my dog barking in the background, but yeah, it's something that we are going to have to tackle, and we are talking about ways to register commenters so that, but we're very passionate about making sure that we do not lose the opportunity to have people comment and participate in meetings from a hybrid perspective, because it really has become the norm.
That's very good input, because we are, as you may have heard, we're going to be taking this up when our chair is back and in January, and figure out where we go from here. To date, we've done everything totally hybrid, and people can be in any place. So we haven't moved off of that at this time, so we'll be revisiting this in January. I think your comments are very helpful.
Yeah, again, my focus here is just making sure that we're not showing bias to one side of this versus the other. And my preference personally would always be to allow for hybrid for everybody, because it really does encourage public comment and engagement as a whole. Again, we've, you know, sort of had this problem with Zoom bombing, and we do need to figure out a solution for this, but you know, I will always advocate for the public engagement as a whole. So, you know, finding a way, if you guys are not having this complication of, you know, sort of this perturbance of Zoom bombing, I would argue that maximizing public engagement is really the best thing that we can do, because that is best for democracy.
Well, that's very good input. Thank you. Does anybody else have anything? We're kind of just in the general update period. All right, then. So I guess we'll take up both this topic and the STRU input from our attorneys in January.
Thank you, Council Preston. We'll see you at the next meeting with that discussion.
Thank you.
Yes.
I appreciate you taking my comment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was very helpful. Thank you for hanging in there. All right, I guess with that, we're looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Have a nice holiday.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.